Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah, and I was a national delegate for Bernie Sanders in 2016 in the state of Colorado. And I've had a lot of friends and family come to me with the same questions or concerns, specifically around Bernie Sanders. And so I thought, you know what, I'm going to make a few videos and share some of the knowledge or information that I have gleaned. And perhaps what I have to say will resonate with you, or if anything, it'll engage a conversation to talk about these issues that we are sitting with, especially in this time as we are very exciting time as we are looking to a new presidency, hopefully. So today, what I'd like to talk about is issues that impact Black and Brown people. And I was part of a round table, an African American round table, in meeting with Bernie Sanders for a rally that he held here in Denver, Colorado. And it was very eye-opening for me because I recognize that there's a lack of knowledge and a lack of presence for Bernie Sanders in the Black community. There's a lot of misconceptions and misinformation out there. And so me being a Black woman in support of Bernie Sanders, I just wanted to share some of my own opinions about Bernie Sanders and my feelings around these issues and where he lies. And so I have a little list here. So if I'm looking down, I'm just looking at some of the topics I want to talk about. It is frustrating and it is unfortunate that more of our community do not know about Bernie Sanders and his consistency and where he's stood for Black and Brown bodies in America. Not simply because of the him talking about being an active member of the during the civil rights movement, and the iconic picture of him being dragged by police during a protest, during a march. But what is important to look at is to look at his career over the last 40 years, and you see that he has lived forward a lot of the same desires that a lot of the leaders of our community have so long held around social justice and true equality and true equity for all people. And Martin Luther King, which I'm looking over here because I have a picture of his. He is he is such a icon for me, towards being a voice that was often misunderstood, but in alignment with the need for social justice and true equity in the systems of our government and the structures of our society. And I mean, he was a democratic socialist, same as Bernie Sanders, democratic socialist. So Bernie Sanders, during the conversation that we had with him, he was only able to address a few subjects, a few questions that we in the Black community in Colorado had for him, and then he had to move on because he had a rally to get to. And it was unfortunate to have, such a short window of time with him, but understandably so, because we are in the thick of things with Super Tuesday around the corner and the need to reach as many people as possible. And so he has very little time, but his wife, Jane, who is an amazing example of leadership, I just have to say, and so well versed and knowledgeable about the issues, and her willingness to engage discourse, to engage a conversation around Black issues, Black and Brown issues, I thought was phenomenal. And there was a question about, why is there not a lot of legislation from Bernie Sanders specifically for the Black community, around issues for the Black community? And she so eloquently shared the fact that, Bernie Sanders is, he, as a white man, he should not be speaking for other minority groups. That's been the problem that we've seen time and time again, is white people speaking for us rather than taking a step back and allowing you to speak, allowing us to speak for our community. And so, Bernie, rather than pushing legislation and creating legislation, has always looked to those in leadership who represent those minority groups. And the legislation and the policy that they're creating, because they are members of and representation of and leadership for these minority groups, these communities of color, of minority. And what he does is he uses his experience, his privilege, to be an ally and to help support that policy and that legislation that's being put in front of Congress. And time and time again, he's always voted in favor of policy that he knew was in support of all of these different groups, of all of these different communities. And that, to me, is really a huge sign of the kind of leader that you want, because you want someone who understands that they do not know fully and cannot relate to the experience and know the solutions without having firsthand experience of the situation, right? Of the issue. And so to take a step back and allow those who do represent those groups to, and who are the leadership representing those groups, and then to support them and do whatever he can to push, that policy and legislation forward. That's true leadership. And he's, if anything, what I have experience of Bernie is, he's a straight shooter. He's very direct. He can be nonchalant. He's rough around the edges. He's not there to make people feel comfortable. And we're in a time now where we need to not be sitting under the veil of comfort, because that's how things have gotten out of control. He's there to simply do the work and do it to the best of his ability. And for that alone, I feel like anyone who is Black and brown in this society should be looking towards Bernie Sanders as one of their top considerations for their vote during this primary. I remember in 2016, when Black Lives Matter was very vocal. And, I remember the moment when Bernie Sanders, some protesters got on the stage, and rather than him, calling security, which has happened, especially during that time, Hillary Clinton called security to have people removed off the stage. He took a step back and let them speak. And then he recognized that he was not attuned or informed enough about the issues around systemic and institutionalized racism. He had some understanding of and had, been in support of legislation and policy of creating real equity and equality, but he did not know to the depths, and he chose in that moment to learn. And he reached out to leadership in our community. And I remember he had a panel discussion, and if I can find the video on YouTube, I will share the link below. But I remember watching it, and he had a very honest conversation around the issues that were ailing the Black community. And he allowed these different leaders to speak their truth, to speak to the issues in such an honest and authentic way. That's when he truly had my buy-in. As a delegate at the National Convention, I personally demonstrated for Black Lives Matter, as did many on my delegation who were in support of Bernie Sanders. Unfortunately, did not for the other side of our delegation at that time. But to feel the real support there, and the willingness to listen, not hear, but to really listen and engage, to me, that set him apart instantly. Because for him, it wasn't a talking point. It wasn't something to say to lean towards public opinion. It was a seeking to understand truly and find ways of making change. I remember there was some sort of platform around issues, specifically for those who are disenfranchised, for Black and brown people. And I couldn't find it, but that was back in, when he was running for office in 2016. And there was, his contender at the time, she did not have a platform like that in the way that he had created that, leaning on different leadership, both known and unknown in the Black community, activists and community organizers, along with leadership in government to help have a conversation and engage solutions. And so knowing that he's done that and he has been vocal and been an ally over the extent of his career is a huge winning factor in the fact that Bernie Sanders supports the Black and brown communities of our country. When he says, I want a government and am working for a government and a governing body that represents and mirrors the American people, I believe that. You look at people who are running his campaign now, uh, is very diverse. There are women, men of different backgrounds, different races. It's a priority for him in a way that he actually embodies it, that other candidates do not. I don't believe they do. When it comes to reparations, there's some misunderstanding about Bernie Sanders not supporting reparations. Bernie Sanders supports reparations, but he doesn't support writing a check to everyone and calling it a day. Because that's not enough considering what the history of 400 years of slavery and marginalization in this country has done to our community. Writing a check is not enough. That is a temporary answer, and it doesn't even go far enough to repay the amount of inequality and the lack of accessibility that we have had in this society. So Bernie has always spoken to the form of economics because Bernie understands that race is a construct that has been used time and time again, to create separation and give those who hold the power to have more power and privilege in the society. It is a tool that has been used to divide this country. But if we look at the real root down issue, it always leans towards economics. It always leans towards income equality. So important. If you think about the thought leaders that we've had in the Black community, three come to mind right off the bat: Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Amiri Baraka. While their movements started from the basis of racial inequality at the heart of it, they all had a flip where they recognized the real fight is in social equality, economic equality, income equality. This is an economic issue. It is about money and the power and influence of money in the society. That is the fight. And if you think about how these different thought leaders have made that switch, it's not too surprising to see how they've become either censored or taken out. That has happened time and time again, because those who have power and privilege in the society like to hold on and keep that power and privilege. And so when it comes to race is a construct. And Bernie wants to talk about the real issue and address the issue, which is the inequality that exists from an economic level. You create a level playing ground there, you create true equality for all people. Bernie Sanders speaks for, or in the tongue of, for all. He says Medicare for all, education for all. He doesn't say, I'm going to stipulate certain policy that beholds Black people and brown people. No, he says, let's create a system that has true equity and equality for all. Because that's what is necessary if we really want to have real sovereignty or freedom in our lives in this country. That's the greatest form of reparation we can have, is to have a system that is instilled to be equal for us, Black and brown people in this society. On top of that, I'm sure that there's conversations about what more can be done for our community. He has addressed that or given light to that, but cannot go into specifics about that. But, Bernie Sanders isn't against reparations. He's incredibly for reparations, but he's not for reparations in the way that people have been talking about reparations, which is to write a check. No, he wants true equity and true equality instilled into the systems and the institutions of our country. And that's incredibly important. So he definitely supports the Black community and he wants he's fighting for us, truly. I truly believe that. I asked the question to his wife about, it doesn't matter what issues we talk about. It doesn't matter if we talk about criminal justice and, institutionalized racism and structural racism, supremacy, legislation and policy that's still racist. It doesn't matter what issue we address, it doesn't matter what we talk about. If we don't actually have people in seats of government that represent those communities who are working for policy and legislation that supports and is foundational for those communities. Then it's a mute point, And so when I think about Obama, who I have a lot of respect for him being, the first Black president in the United States, when he went to select his cabinet did not represent the American people. Leadership did not represent the diversity of the American people. It represented a lot of corporate white men. That cannot keep happening if we want real change, especially in the marginalized communities of our society. We need people in leadership who come from those communities and from different levels within those communities. Like we gotta do away with, lawyers and businessmen in office, because that is not representative of America that is filled with, scientists, engineers, doctors, blue collar workers, laborers, unionizers, teachers, social workers, nutritionists, psychologists, also the full spectrum of our society. All of these different facets that we have, just the diverse nature. Where are those voices in leadership? They're not there. We have businessmen and lawyers who are making decisions for teachers, workers, social workers, therapists, healers, creatives, artists. How are they representative of the complexity and the diversity of our country? It's not at all. And then even more so, people of color, right? Black and brown bodies, of the full spectrum. So it's important to have leadership in position to build an administration that is representative. And he has been very clear that that is a huge priority for him. Already working on it. Especially if you look at his campaign. Extremely diverse, I would say. Again, he's on point. He's on mission. He stands with, institutionalized racism, just the dysfunction and violence that exists in the criminal justice system. We have to find a solution. We cannot be silent. We cannot wait anymore. And we have to look towards those who are running for leadership, who have spoken in alignment of change in that specific area. It is so crucial. And of all the candidates who are up there for, who are looking for your vote, it is so important that you recognize, those who have acted consistently in support, who have been vocal about the systemic inequalities, the racism, the supremacy that exists in this country, in this administration, in our governing body, in our systems and institutions right now, and understands where it started, how it is built, how it is protected, and how it needs to be dismantled. And Bernie Sanders, very solid on his positioning around that, and has offered solutions that he has sought out from representatives of our community. It's vital. It is vital. Housing. That's a huge crisis right now. In Colorado, there is a huge scaling out of the population here. A lot of people are moving here. It is becoming incredibly gentrified. Communities that were primarily Black and brown are disappearing. People, as those communities are pushed out, housing prices go up, businesses move in, and not small businesses, franchises, corporate power behind them, driving up prices in those communities that become inaccessible. We are losing the presence of diversity here in Colorado. Is literally on its last thread here. Something needs to change and shift. Something has to be done for housing. There are too many Black and brown communities who are losing their access to secure quality housing throughout this country. And definitely here in Colorado, it is a problem. Bernie Sanders has spoken to the need of housing and the need to protect our communities. And so, again, we should be aligning with him because he fights for us. There was a conversation around immigration. This is a subject that I personally had not even thought about, is the fact that, when we talk about immigration, we're talking a lot about our brown brothers and sisters, of Latino community here. But we are not talking about our Black community, those who are immigrants who are coming here from Africa. Their voices are not being heard. The media is putting all the focus on the Latino community, but immigration has many faces and many colors, and it needs to be addressed and inclusive of the real situation. And Bernie Sanders, to be made aware of that is definitely something. I know that Jane had said he's he has been of conversation, but that, yeah, this is an area of more reflection, uh, and it was something that I myself, hadn't taken into perspective. And it's meaningful. It's important. So I think I covered enough here, but if curious, if you are a Black or brown person out there and you are in support of Bernie Sanders, you know, uh, what are your feelings and opinions? What have you seen on how he fights for you and how he fights for us? Uh, I know in my heart of hearts that if we are going to have any real course to dismantle these things, especially coming out of an administration that is so poisoned our culture with supremacist thought and influence. We really have to rally together here, and we need to rally behind the candidate that is going to be fighting for the change that we seek in our communities. And I really believe that Bernie Sanders is the one candidate that has built enough trust to support. And yeah, he's a white man, but how amazing would it be if the next president that we have after him and the legacy after him is that there's room at the table and we truly can have a minority, someone who represents the Black, brown community, who is even a woman. Wouldn't that be incredible? Because we have a person who is using their privilege to fight for those who are underprivileged in our society and to instill equity and equality, just like in the same vein as so many of our current and former thought leaders have been fighting for. That would be incredible. So if you like this video and you want more content like this, please like or subscribe. And most of all, engage the conversation. Do so respectively. Again, we are integral, and having discourse, seeing difference of opinion, and being able to come to the table and learn more and viewpoints that are outside of our own, that's how we grow. That's how we innovate. It's how we build relationship. It's how we move forward together. So engage with respect, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.